Talk Radio 77 WABC, America's most powerful radio station. This is War Room Pandemic. Tuesday, the 7th of April, the year of our Lord 2020. Jack Maxey, Jason Miller, Raheem Kassam, Stephen K. Bannon, the New York City Special Report, or as we call it now, the pregame to the president's press conference every day. You get a 30-minute pregame, you get the president's 2.5-hour press conference. And it's going to be action-packed today. The president of the United States just tweeted out that he is going to be addressing the New York Times' Maggie Haberman's piece and Jonathan Swan and Ms. Talev over at Axios, their piece on Peter Navarro's memos that he sent to the President of the United States back in January of this year. One was a talk about shutting down all air traffic to China. The other was about the first package that had to be done to fight coronavirus. So both of those got leaked. Peter Navarro had to defend himself. I was honored to defend Peter and Axios. We're going to get to that in the second segment. We got so much going on in New York. Let's try to walk through this. Jack, Raheem, what have we got before we go to Mayor de Blasio and Governor Cuomo?
I'll give you the breakdown in New York State right now. There's about 140,000 positive cases, and in New York City there are 75,000. There were 4,009 deaths so far in the city. And yesterday was a very painful day for New York State. We lost 731. That's the highest number yet. But Governor Cuomo gave some potentially good news in that the number of hospitalizations is slowing down. The number of people requiring ICU beds and intubation seems to be slowing down. And as he said, deaths are a lagging indicator. So according to the University of Washington model, it looks like we're about 3 or 4 days away from hitting the peak here in New York. And you guys should be really proud of yourself, because you've shown the whole country what you guys can do. The governor also said that he's ready to start imposing fines for people who are not following social distancing, $1,000 a pop. He said that there's no plans to move the ventilators from upstate. He's not going to order that because Oregon and California have come through with some ventilators that are going to make it so that New York City has plenty.
California, this is President Newsom sent this over.
President
we'll talk about that later.
Cuomo,
yes. Governor Cuomo, you can't be taking the ventilators from California. It's not a good look.
And then the other thing he said, when we've been talking about it now for 2 or 3 weeks, is this idea of launching this antibody testing. He says his hope is that they can begin to start having rolling openings in New York State in the coming weeks as this thing starts to settle down. Don't want to get anyone's hopes up too high, but it does look like we're reaching the peak here, guys. And
well,
we're all proud of you.
I want to go back to the University of Washington. If you believe the University of Washington's, and this is, I think today, part of the press conference to talk about Navarro's memos, these detailed memos to the president, and particularly the one in January that basically forecasted that it'd be a $5 trillion hit to the economy. You'd have to plug that. And he did if you did the herd immunity strategy, it could be he came up with 2 million, right? He was going off some of the studies we were looking at the time that were out there. It's pretty prophetic of what he had to say. But if you look at University of Washington, in this peak, where they peak on the 10th and the 11th, and I think with under 1,000 deaths per day when they hit that plateau.
Yes, it looks like the 10th, 11th for New York State, and it looks like they're projecting a maximum of 865 deaths, which looks like we're rolling pretty well along. They were off by about 80 today.
The one thing that is before it was going to peak and come back down on a fairly steep slope, what you're hearing now from implied from Governor Cuomo, from Sanjay Gupta, other people looking at these numbers and running their own numbers or looking at these models running their own numbers, this may plateau for a while and then come back down. So we don't know what this plateau is. Remember, though, when we started this, it was 7 to 21 days. It was going to be anywhere from the 7th or 8th all the way up to the 21st. At least we're getting to the apex it looks like earlier.
Yes, and I think that's a positive thing. I think the other thing is that it looks like the decline is going to be gradual, just like the one going up. So in a way, I guess the public health officials—
But a gradual decline is not good. You want a steep decline. Gradual decline means you're still at these levels, these 500, 600 a day.
Well, actually, the steep decline is usually because you've had a rapid increase, right? You've blown way up and you're going to decline really fast. So in a way, hopefully this implies that some of the social distancing measures that have been done in New York have had a positive impact.
But isn't always the steep increase and then the slower decline on the back end? That's the thing that the models taught us, was that we can't get to cocky or confident looking and saying, hey, we got to the peak, we're done, because
You're only
literally,
halfway
no
through.
question.
but the ramp
Yeah.
down
Yes.
could take upwards of 3 times as long as the ramp
Exactly.
up because of the way this works.
That's
I'm
Jack's
simply-
theory
I'm-
that, hey, the total amount of people are going to die, you're just spreading out the distribution of how long it goes. I mean, this is one of the parts of this theory.
That is to a certain extent the way it works, and we've seen it before in other pandemics.
I believe you're going to see today, at least the beginning, that there's going to be a lot more crispness when they start talking about numbers, both at the state level, at the federal level, by CDC, et cetera. Here's the reason. New York City is Wuhan. That's the one that everybody's focused on. That's the hot zone with the tri-state area. You can't get through this thing in April and start talking about, and you saw the market today, the stock market. Remember, we covered the economic crisis and the financial. Stock market was up almost 1,000 points, gave it up in the last hour. And one of the reasons that we're hearing is that people they don't really understand what the out is here. What is it, end of April, and what's the program? And I think that's why today, when the president tweets this out, you're going to see people getting into a lot more metrics. And I think people at home need to hear that. They need to know what the metrics are, what people are looking at, what's when New York goes through this, because New York will be the first, but it'll be the most important. Others will follow. But once New York's through it, you can kind of start to see, how do we plan for the rest of the country?
Governor Cuomo actually addressed this. We've been big advocates for letting the American people see the raw data, and he was asked about this in his press conference today, and he said that New York State is going to have statistical data on the people that died in the next week or so. And also Mayor de Blasio was questions about this as well, because there's been some things in the news about people of color suffering at a little high rate.
But this is different than what I'm saying. I'm saying the numbers so that we build the models. But they're saying something I think is very important, is what is the actual demographics here? What and where are those high-risk areas that you need to put more resources? Remember, coming out of here, there's not going to be – and do we have the vaccine thing? Maybe we play that before we play Governor. Do we have the guy talking about the vaccine?
Yes.
If we can get there. Look, maybe we'll get to Cuomo. The thing on the vaccine is that you've got guys now talking, I think, realistically about we're not going to have a vaccine for a while, okay? I've said, hey, 18 months, I don't see it. You don't have a SARS vaccine. You don't have a MERS vaccine. You don't have an HIV vaccine. You have therapeutics, particularly for HIV. So that the therapeutics, which the hydroxychloroquine is clearly in an emergency basis, being some sort of therapeutics here in New York City. You can tell that we get this all the time from the doctors, from New Rochelle, from Dr. William Grace, for other doctors. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be what's out there as what kept the doctor-nurses units as composed as possible. We didn't have in Italy. One reason was because of that, also because of higher standards, et cetera, of inside the ICUs and the emergency rooms. But the coming out here has got to be some combination of therapeutics, mass testing, where you then do the tracking and you do the individual quarantine, and what Cuomo said today, which he said the antibodies testing. That 3-part program will then start to get us the pool that you can then start to open up.
Well, so the data allows you to manage the crisis, right? If we can have drug therapeutics that can help extend life or keep people. Remember AIDS. AIDS used to be a death sentence for people, and now the antiviral drugs that we have are prolonging people's lives for many decades.
Yeah, and so we have 2 things that are adding some confusion right now. Number one, you have updated models from the University of Washington and from others. States are starting to develop their own health organizations. But then you also have some of the social distancing efforts are starting to have an impact. But then you have the issue of rolling peaks. And so if you're at home –
Explain what rolling peaks is to the
rolling
audience.
peaks. This goes back to that University of Washington study that I believe first came out March 27, 28. Then they just revised it the other day, I think a day or two ago. And basically what that says is each metro area is going to have their own peak, and they're going to have their own schedule. So whereas New York is maybe within 3-4 days away, we're coming up on that pretty quickly here. You might not have the peak for, say, California until the end of this month. You might not have a Washington, D.C. until the middle of May. And then in between, you're going to have all these, whether it's Detroit, whether it's New Orleans. Here's an issue where even at the state level, folks are getting some mixed messages. We talked about this on our morning show, but in Colorado yesterday afternoon, the state health folks came out and said that the peak is going to be somewhere between mid-May or later in the summer. Then Governor Polis went on live TV in Colorado last night, statewide, and said that they're going to extend their stay in place order up until April 26th, several days ahead of the national stay in place. And so the goal is to reopen. So literally, even at a state-by-state basis, people at home are getting mixed messages. But again, it's revised data plus rolling peaks plus some of these social distancing efforts working.
Aren't we still getting in the tri-state area? Aren't we still getting somewhat mixed messages between the governor and the mayor? The governor being very definitive and kind of walking through and talking about the University of Washington models and other models and talking about peak, where Mayor de Blasio and the team around him have still been fairly ill-defined?
Let's go to the tape. Here's Governor Cuomo.
Let's talk about today's numbers and where we are today. Total number of newly hospitalized is up from yesterday, but when you look at the 3-day
We'll come back.
We'll come back. Okay, first, hashtag War Room Pandemic. The thing's on fire. We want all of your comments, observations. We're going to return with War Room Pandemic, the New York City special report pregame in a minute.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
New York's Talk Radio, 77 WABC. This is War Room Pandemic, the New York City special report. We've got some breaking news out of Europe, Mr. Kassam.
We do. The European Union's top scientist is reportedly resigning over the bloc's response to the coronavirus. The Financial Times reporting that Professor Mauro Ferrari has resigned as the president of the European Research Council, quote, extremely disappointed by the European response to COVID-19. Professor Ferrari started his term, a 4-year job, only in January of this year. And the piece is saying, it quotes him as saying, I arrived a fervent supporter of the EU, but the COVID-19 crisis completely changed my views.
This would be the equivalent of Fauci right now resigning in Tanama.
Yeah.
They have another guy that's a chief scientist, but this would be to Fauci. And remember, we can't really come out of this recession, this economic crisis, unless Europe kind of comes out at the same time, right? It's got to be our economies are so interlinked. There's got to be some partnership here. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of dissension all the way from Sweden and the UK have done the herd immunity and now kind of backtracking and trying other things to Germany's got a different method. Spain and Italy have basically been eviscerated. Let's go back to Governor Cuomo.
Just not to toot my own horn too much, but remember this morning I talked about the capability gap that was left for the European Union member states and left from Brussels. We're now seeing ramifications of that.
Let's go to. Well, that's not tooting your own horn. That's a good shout out. I was about to say that. Let's go to. I want to play Governor Cuomo in its entirety. This is very important because there is some discrepancy between the two leaders of this.
About today's numbers and where we are today. Total number of newly hospitalized is up from yesterday, but when you look at the 3-day averaging of these numbers, the 3-day average is down, which is good news. This is the 3-day hospitalization rate. We tend not to look at any one day. Day to day, it's up somewhat, but if you look at the 3-day average, it's moving down, which is good news. We talk about the apex, and is the apex a plateau? And right now we're projecting that we are reaching a plateau in the total number of hospitalizations.
And then deaths lag that. The better, if they could give us, and I would like to have this, is number of tests versus number of new cases. The increase in tests. That's why in the United States right now, I do think we're having it for the first time, a glimmer of hope in that, and that the testing goes up, but the number of new cases percentages go down, and that's always an indicator that other better, not as bad news is going to come following that.
But then we have Mayor de Blasio saying this.
Right now, and I'm going to say this as a non-doctor, I am assuming the vast majority of those deaths are coronavirus related. It's understandable in a crisis that being able to make the confirmation is harder to put all the resources stretched so thin. And with the sense of concern, Aaron, I think you would agree, the concern, the first use of all of the everything we got our professionals, our healthcare workers, our resources, the first thing we are focused on is saving the next life. So we do want to know the truth about what happened in every death at home, but I think we can say at this point it's right to assume the vast majority are coronavirus related, and that makes it even more sober, the sense of how many people we are losing, how many families are suffering, how real this crisis is.
So I don't know if I disagree. Remember, he's saying the delta is between the 200. They're finding basically 200 at home every day, versus a normal run rate of 20 to 30. And he's arguing that gap's because of coronavirus, and they don't have the resources to test. I'm not sure. I totally disagree with you on that.
I think he's probably correct. I mean, we said this a month ago when they first started getting the tests of the people in that old age home in Kirkland, Washington. And you remember we're in what they call a bad flu season. So the previous month in that same rest home, they had an increased number given the average over the years. And there's probable likelihood that some of those died of COVID-19. And I think you're going to see counties all around the country going back and taking a look at some of the lab results of people who died in the previous months. What
my problem is with de Blasio, it's not tough enough of what they're doing. I realize here in Washington, D.C., which we just went to the sheltered home, it's gotten worse. Everybody's out now. You'll talk about it in the next block. But the polling I saw where 14% of people are saying, I'm under mandatory quarantine. Another 42% said they're self-quarantining. That's 56%. That's still not, depending on how you define quarantine. To break the back of this thing now, particularly as you're coming through this apex, and you want to have a sharper slope so you're not dragging this thing out, people have to – it's social distancing and hardcore social distancing that's doing it right now. The other thing is that we're still not getting good guidance from the federal government of who's flying into JFK. I mean, right now, as we know it, they've stopped certain countries in Europe, but not all countries. You got to be part of the EU, right? They've stopped China, but still China. 40,000 New York Times found because of all the the stuff the State Department put in, the outages, right? That you've got 40,000 people coming. You still have people plowing into Kennedy. Right, that coming from affected countries.
Something we've never heard anybody discuss, and we've talked about it for a long time, that there are 350,000 Chinese students in America, 50,000 from Hong Kong, 300,000 from the mainland. How many of those 400,000 that they said came back into the country since January were students? Because I think that's a real thing that we have to look at.
I'm not so sure so many because remember they'd gone home for the Lunar New Year and on break. I think we're going to find out that most of the students remained in China because Lunar New Year wasn't until like the 18th.
But I mean, they're on a U.S. school schedule. They're not.
But I think a lot of schools are down in January. We'll find it. That's a stat they're going to give us. Okay, hashtag War Room Pandemic. President's supposed to start at 5:30. We're going to go through the controversy. I think you'll see some fireworks today, right? Because the mainstream media is loaded for bear. Trump's loaded for bear. They had these two stories from two of his favorite people, Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, right, leaked by the White House with a snarky comment of a senior White House administrator talking about, Navarro is part of the crazy anti-China crowd, and that's why they didn't believe his numbers. So I think today is going to be quite interesting, and I think my belief is maybe the scientists finally get asked a hard question on Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci. Exactly what numbers you're talking about. Are these from the University of Washington? Are they from Harvard? The other day she named an unnamed. Well, we have a new independent study, right? Okay. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. This is War Room Pandemic, the New York City special report. We're going to return momentarily with the president's press conference and more of pregame.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
The virus is a demon, but so is President Xi of the Chinese Communist Party. He's a demon, and we're not going to allow him to hide. We're in pandemic, the New York City special report. Momentarily, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, will take the podium in the Brady Room, which is kind of a petri dish of. I hope that I hope they're taking the hydroxychloroquine down there.
Here's one of the buried leads. is one of the reasons why you haven't seen so many big dog reporters. You still have some. You have some who'll never make it, like John Carl, as we found out yesterday. A+ heckle from the president. You'll never make it. And then he like throws lightning bolts at him, and then he blows them up, eviscerates them.
Chief political reporter and White House correspondent.
The reason why you don't see a lot of reporters, though, that you normally see in there is because newsrooms are concerned about the potential spread of coronavirus. Even though they're checking temperatures, even though they're sitting, 5 feet apart as opposed to 1 foot apart, that's a reason we're not seeing.
And they still can't give One American News, the reporter, a seat, or she got to stay in the back. Let's go to Jonathan Swan. This is very important. The President of the United States has tweeted out, and I think he's coming in loaded for bear. He's tweeted out, hey, I am going to personally address the stories about the Peter Navarro memos and the memos today. So I think it's throwdown day. Jonathan Swan has just tweeted out he's getting blown up by the
he tweeted out a little bit ago that he's getting beat up by the right, people saying it's fake news and things like this. So I want to go and set the stage.
When people say it's fake news, he actually has Navarro's memos. The White House, somebody at the White House leaked those memos, or somebody that had them. It might be Mulvaney or somebody that was there, is leaked those memos to Axios and at least described them to the New York Times, because Maggie Haberman may not have had the memos, but she had descriptions of them.
Right. And to be fair, maybe, at least 2 or 3 of those emails that Jonathan were from me, just heckling him, just because that's normally what I do on a Tuesday. But I want to take this back to, look, here's what they have, what Jonathan Swan has, and I believe Maggie Haberman had or now has. But basically, there was a memo that Peter Navarro wrote and distributed, circulated
late January
in the White House about the need to go and shut off travel with China, the need to take this pandemic seriously, the fact that this was blown up all over the world, and it was leaked by Peter Navarro haters. And the reason why they're doing it is here is China hater bad. They're trying to go and put Peter Navarro out on an island. Here's their problem on a couple of different fronts.
Hold on. One other thing, hydroxy bad. The day before, this is a twofer, so we're going to give you some inside baseball. This is an organized attack on Peter Navarro. Number one, he's always got the president's back. He's running the program of getting all the logistics in, and he's got a team over there working, many of the guys we know. But this is an organized attack. They have a detailed, as certain reporter called it, his Michelangelo of the Situation Room the day before, a story from this weekend that about Navarro arguing for hydroxy, where, against Fauci, right? In pretty dramatic, tense situation, incredible detail. So that was leaked, and obviously multiple people were talking. And then today, these two memos, and these memos are very important. The reason the President of the United States is going to address them, what happened in late January was absolutely central to buying us time that we could get organized, that certain institutions may have not lived up to their previous reputations. Maybe the people were not that organized. Everywhere from Governor Cuomo said New York State haven't had everything, to the federal government. Hey, that can all be discussed, debated later. But the facts are, when Navarro was essentially forced to write these memos, and they've got, once you see that memo and it says 2 million Americans dead, which is very much what was Birch. The Dr. Birx and Fauci talked about the other day of the modeling that they have used from the University of Washington and others with the herd immunity. What he said, and I'm quoted because he was getting lit up, and I felt I had to step in with Jonathan Swan, have his back, is that he was prophetic. Everything he talked about, the $5 trillion, the 2 million potential dead, the couple 100,000 on the low end of the side, he was prophetic. But it was those memos that were the key to turn this around.
Right. And so here's what the media is trying to figure out right now. And you'll notice from a lot of the reports that they don't say Peter Navarro's name. And the reason why they don't say his name, they say this senior advisor, is because they don't want to elevate Peter Navarro. Because look, I mean, we're going to have to make up our Peter Navarro was right T-shirts because he called this thing. So here's where the media is all twisted up like a pretzel. Number one, it's, again, they don't want to elevate Peter Navarro. Number two, President took immediate action like a day or two later to go and shut off these flights to China. So it gives the president an opportunity to come back and remind people what he did. Here's the other thing. Dr. Fauci is now taking credit for stopping the flights to China. Full stop.
So coming from these memos, no matter what your judge, and this we try to be very even-handed on the show. President Trump took 5 major actions. Number one, against the advice of his economic advisors and his medical advisors, he shut down flights from China. Okay. Number two, he quarantined people. American citizens had not been quarantined in the United States, I think I was told, for 50 or 60 years. Okay. He changed the They changed the protocols at the old age homes because they knew up in Seattle the biggest problem they were having was coming out of Seattle. Boom, they changed that. He also formalized the structure and the formation of the White House Corona Task Force. Now, Pence was not put in charge yet, but Azar, as the senior representative from the medical community, he didn't put political people in charge. He didn't put policy people. He put Azar, who at least the scientists reported to him. So he didn't put like Mnuchin or somebody like that. And he the last thing he did was to stand up to tell CDC, hey, we got to get testing going, to give CDC, who said, we've got the lead on this, go do the testing. Those 5 power actions, and not all of them turned out. We understand that the CDC blew it because CDC had their own way. The administrative state had their own way of doing something. It turns out later we changed course, and Governor Cuomo was at the lead of this, of thinking about laboratories and state universities getting involved, being more entrepreneurial. But the actions that came off of those sets of meetings and at that time gave forward momentum for us to start to address it. Now, look, the president at his rallies and talking about, the Democratic Party trying to use it, to me, that's all process stuff. You see, that's the signal from the noise. That's the noise. The signal was and the railhead of that was Peter Navarro. And knowing Peter, he had to be felt that he had to do this to put it in writing. Right? It is obviously, when you see something like that in writing, you go, "Oh wow, why did somebody write this?"
And it wasn't like he did it off the cuff. Peter, he's thorough. He thought about it. He sought out the advice of the best experts he could get in a timely fashion on Trump time. Let's face it, they shut down Wuhan 5 days before he wrote this memo.
This is the other thing. See, the reason that Navarro and ourselves, everybody that kind of went to the ramparts, were what I call China hands. When you showed me the thing in late December, people that know China. No, when you mention SARS, and let me repeat this, there is no vaccine for SARS. Okay, what happened in SARS what happened in mainland China and Hong Kong in the early 2000s has never really been reported. The West doesn't understand. It was 10 times worse than what
in Beijing, particularly.
The whole thing. I mean, it was, and so when they saw it was a SARS outbreak, it was enough for the CCP to tamp it, to basically suppress it. It was like the reactor Chernobyl going off, right, and coming up into the atmosphere. Well, it was that level, SARS. But Peter immediately knew this was going to be a problem. And what happened, he couldn't get a forum, and we know this. Azar couldn't get to see the president. They had these meetings. Mulvaney, it's official, his first meeting, it's documented, was on the 27th. The President of the United States is now going to take the stage. We're going to peel off. Raheem Kassam is now going to follow this. We anticipate there may be some fireworks today because the media is loaded for bear, right? And they've been gunning for the president, and the president gives as good as he gets, right? And he's not shy about fighting back. But I do think today, since the president tweeted that out, this could be substantive in the fact of exactly what's going on here, and I think he'll lean into this.
Isn't it fascinating though that we got so much clarity from the social scientist and so much opaque kind of unclarity from the real scientists?
Well, this is what I want to say also about Fauci and the Vanity Fair piece, but other people have told me he's been quoted around town as saying he talked the president into the China ban. That's just absolutely not true. And Dr. Fauci, I think he's got to come clean with that. It was Peter Navarro that argued in this memo, and Pottinger, who's an old China hand from the Wall Street Journal, speaks perfect Mandarin, is now Deputy National Security Advisor. I believe one day Pottinger will be the National Security Advisor in the next term. He is a fabulous young man. He is a China hawk, and he knows China. It was those two guys against everybody else. And it's not that other people were wrong about this, but you could see in the leak they gave to Jonathan Swan, they thought this was more of not Pottinger's, but Navarro's anti-China craziness, right? They thought it was his anti-China bias.
One more example of how political correctness has gotten us into a hole here, right? Remember, it was xenophobic on the part of Schumer and everyone else for us to shut down those flights.
First off, Biden goes to him. It goes right after the president when he shut down the flight. Xenophobic, racist, and nativist. Wuhan had already been Hubei province had been put in lockdown. Size of France, 60 to 80 million people. And Wuhan, at 14 million people, 40% bigger than New York, had started to be quarantined. The president of the United States, he knows China. He knows China. I met with him in 2010. He knows China as well as anybody. He knew that this was a big deal, and particularly knows that Xi doing this was a big deal.
I want to remind people also that anyone who's trying to beat up on Peter Navarro really played themselves here, for the simple fact that having a conversation about January, what moves happened in January, are not good for the haters, so to speak. And I'll tell you why.
Why is that?
Because it brings back what was, say, Dr. Anthony Fauci saying at the same time. Here's Dr. Fauci from January 26th with John Katzmatidis.
With you. What can you tell the American people about what's going on? Should they be scared?
I don't think so. The American people should not be worried or frightened by this. It's a very, very low risk to the United States.
Talk Radio 77 WABC, the John Katzmatidis show. There's some background here. We had started already. Remember, we were taking an hour off of. We started actually in the 2-hour impeachment show. I would take a part of it and start talking about, and I went up and did the broadcast. I was gone for 3 or 4 days up to New York to do the Chinese New Year's with the Chinese. And when I came on, I would do part of it. Then we actually bifurcated the show and took an hour at that time of 2020 first and impeachment, and we did the other. And Katz, I said, hey, I talked to Katz. I said, this is the biggest thing in human history. This is going to change everything. He goes, really? He says, well, I know Fauci. You got Fauci on. And Fauci, I get up and see the Hill newspaper says, American senior health official, no problem to America, no issue. And he's saying, hey, Fauci said it was a nothing burger.
And just 4 or 5 days ago, he lauded the World Health Organization for being on top of this. He lauded the Chinese scientists for all of their data. I mean, at some point, you have to question his common sense. Maybe he's a wonderful scientist.
Well, that's why I think the sparks going to fly today. The president's tweet this morning, the president went after the World Health Organization as he should. They have not been helpful to the world in this. They've covered for the Chinese Communist Party. That tweet that you dug up on the 14th of January, remember, the 14th of January is when they're in the East Room of the White House signing the big first phase of the trade deal. We have a whole delegation, I think, of 50 representatives, never brought up ever to anybody the situation in Wuhan and Hubei province. At Davos that same week, they were there. Maria Bartiromo actually interviews an infectious scientist. Nobody else is talking about it. They have a 400-person delegation, I think, there, and never brought it up. And this is why it was so important. The 14th of January, they tweet out, the World Health Organization tweets out that after consultation with the Chinese health minister and other senior members of the Chinese scientific community, they tell us they have no human-to-human transmission. That's a lie. The reason you're sitting in your house tonight in New York City, the reason you're unemployed, the reason you're having to go get unemployment, the reason you're looking for a $1,000 check to tide you over, the reason that you're online trying to fill out some form with a bank to get your payroll, the reason all of it, the reason of all the dead in New York City is because the Chinese Communist Party in Beijing made a decision in December to suppress this information from world health officials all over and to suppress this just like the Soviets did on Chernobyl. They thought they could manage this process, and it was only when Lunar New Year came up and they realized if they let everybody, it's the largest migration in the world, if they let everybody go, the 500 million people that came for that traditional family celebration, they would have had a megaton, and that's when they actually had to start canceling. And that's when people go, what is going on here? They've closed the Forbidden City. They've closed the Great Wall. More importantly, they've closed Disneyland Shanghai, right? They started shutting down and said no trains, nobody on there, and we're going to quarantine a city 40% bigger than New York City. And their quarantine has said, hey, we're going door to door. Remember, at that time they started building the hospitals. They built 2 complete hospitals like the Javits Center, but from the ground up in 10 days. They knew they had a panic.
The other thing is, if they had called it SARS, which it is, it's the twin brother, basically, or little sister of the SARS-1, the Chinese people themselves would have reacted properly. They would have started social separation without even being told to do it.
I think they were afraid of a panic. That's why they didn't, because they know SARS, they should have done this. If they had come forward in December, none of this, the people of Wuhan would not have been destroyed. No. And don't believe their numbers right now. I think it's New York City. New York City is not the state. I think New York City is going higher than what China is overall, right? You have, and their numbers are lies. We know that tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands died. So this whole thing has been a lie. The President of the United States, now I can't see him back of me. Is Fauci and Burke's going to take the stage with him, or do we have any indication?
Saw the Vice President, saw Seema Verma, the CMS administrator. Raheem, did you see anyone else? Or
It's not clear right now. They're super tight on the president on the shop.
Okay, and they are covering. Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break. Remember, hashtag War Room Pandemic. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. This is 77 WABC, New York's talk radio. War Room Pandemic, the New York City special report. We're going to return with the entire team and the President of the United States in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
New York's Talk Radio 77 WABC, War Room Pandemic, the New York City special report. President Trump has already announced he's going to Bigfoot Joe Biden tonight, isn't he?
Yeah, Sleepy Joe Biden will be on CNN at 9 p.m. this evening. I wonder if they recorded that earlier. Can he even stay up until 9 anymore?
No, it's a pre-record. Got to be.
The biggest
at 2 o'clock before he does the Sundowner at 4. It's a 2 o'clock pre-record.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Also in news, Joe Biden released a new podcast today, or a new episode with Michigan Governor Half Whitmer. Which, by the way, Joe, we're still leading you. We're still ahead of you on the charts.
Joe, War Room Pandemic is ahead of Joe Biden show.
And
so sleepy.
The super troll, Al Franken's podcast is still 13 spots ahead of Joe Biden. So that just tells you where the energy is within there. But I want to go to a serious thing, because this is what Dr. Fauci was just talking about at the podium. Dr. Jerome Adams, Surgeon General, was on Today's Show earlier, actually on CBS this morning, and he was talking about the impact of the coronavirus on our minority communities. And I want to play this clip and talk a little bit about what's going on around the country right now.
And when you look at being black in America, number one, people unfortunately are more likely to be of low socioeconomic status, which makes it harder to social distance. Number two, we know that blacks are more likely to have diabetes, heart disease, lung disease, and I've shared myself personally that I have high blood pressure, that I have heart disease and spent a week in the ICU due to a heart condition, that I actually have asthma and I'm pre-diabetic. And so I represent that legacy of growing up poor and black in America.
Which, by the way, I want to say Dr. Adams is in better shape than any of us. But here's a very serious thing that's going on all around the country.
No, but it's these comorbidities that become a huge problem.
And
President Trump has just mentioned that in the press conference also.
You go to any local paper around the country right now, it's a front page story today. In Louisiana, 70% of the victims of COVID-19 are African American. Front page of Chicago Tribune today, black Chicagoans dying at a 6 times the rate of white Chicagoans. You even go to the front page of the LA Times. LA County officials worry about lack of racial data. And so this is a massive issue that's hitting the African American and our minority communities.
This was
right now.
Also the administrative state. They didn't want to put demographic information out, but now in this emergency, you've got to get it out, because it's going to drive the communities. You have to be there and try to help in advance.
One thing I'd like to say, this virus does not discriminate against anybody on the basis of race. Probably, I would say that the reason why you're seeing higher numbers is exactly what the Surgeon General said. They're living in higher density populations, and then they have much higher rates of diabetes, obesity, heart disease. And this is really because of the individual lifestyle choices that individuals have made. This is not a universal to people of African descent by any stretch.
What the president right now, Fauci came out. This was, you said it earlier, this was going to be one of the big things today. They wanted to get ahead of this. I think there were also some memes or some stuff on the internet. They said earlier that the Surgeon General address and others addressed that there had been some stuff out there that African Americans couldn't get the coronavirus early, and they wanted to dispel all those, because actually in places like Detroit and in New Orleans and other places, it was hitting it at 7-1, right? So they had to dispel those kind of internet rumors that were not backed up in fact.
Yeah, and that's what we imagine they're going to go into a little bit more here. I'm sure the big action will come during the Q&A period, which it always does with these.
Okay, the guys at AVN. By the way, I want to thank America's Mayor Rudy Giuliani. His show's on fire. It's a great lead-in for us. We love the mayor. He just took him off as a great guest for us, but he's got his own show, so it's even better. 77 WABC is all over this crisis. They're nonstop on this. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. You're giving us a lot of good guidance. We're building a community here. We're getting to see everything. Also, the guys at AVN. Our show is going to end here shortly. But AVN, for the people on AVN Dish 219, they're going to continue to live stream, and they live stream to the bitter end. They're not like MSNBC and CNN that cut away. They take it all the way through the 2 hours. Today may be a big one. Maybe you may want to tune in because they've got definitely going to throw down hard. Okay, War Room Pandemic, the New York City Special Report. We'll see you tomorrow at 5.